Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the main opposition candidate in upcoming presidential elections in Nigeria holds a rally in which he slams President Muhammadu Buhari's security risks. But former VP Atiku Abubakar's campaign is itself dogged by corruption allegations against him. Also, power cuts in South Africa spark fury as the state-owned utility firm Eskom struggles with a shortage of generating capacity for a third straight day. And a month after fatal riots in Zimbabwe, and the country's opposition still refuses to restart talks with the government until all its members are free and soldiers are pulled from the streets. But first, Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, is gearing up to Saturday's presidential polls. It's going to be a close race between current leader, President Muhammadu Buhari, and his main opposition rival, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Already, questions have been raised from both sides about just how free and fair this election will be. Both main parties have accused each other of planning for electoral interference. France 24's Anna Cunningham reports.
Hanatu teaches for free in Abuja at this camp for displaced people. Like these children, she too fled violence in the northeast. Her husband was killed by Boko Haram. Guaranteed security is what she wants from whoever is elected Nigeria's president.
We are expecting the next leader to drop away all Boko Haram in Nigeria so that we can go back to our place.
The Electoral Commission says it wants to ensure people can vote, but it won't be easy for the 1.8 million displaced. In cities like Lagos, this election could prove key, from the densely populated areas to wealthier zones. On the roadsides, mechanics repair cars for the rich. The talk here is about whether Buhari has succeeded in tackling corruption.
Let's say the truth. Buhari didn't fight any corruption. He fight another opponent party. That is what he's doing. He doesn't fight any corruption at all. Because if Buhari wants to fight corruption, he will starting to fight the corruption inside the people who work with him. He's supposed to start from there.
The UK, US and EU have already issued statements calling for Nigeria to hold transparent elections. But the talk here reflects doubts.
I don't think these elections are going to be free and fair. Elections in Nigeria have never been free and fair. Even the election that brought in the current president wasn't free and fair. So I don't think these elections are going to be the one that is free and fair.
On Saturday, international election observers will be out across the country monitoring at polling stations. For now, it's the one thing Nigeria is talking about.
Well, at a campaign rally in Lagos on Tuesday, Atiku Abubakar told crowds that President Muhammadu Buhari had failed in his promises to bring security to Nigeria. Abubakar said that he'd do better and vowed to revive the flagging economy. To his supporters, the former vice president has the business savvy the country needs as it struggles to recover from its first recession in a generation. Abubakar's opponents, though, say that he's a corrupt opportunist. He's got just days to convince the electorate.
A well-known figure in the world of business and politics, Atiku Abubakar is the leading opposition candidate. His campaign has focused on the nation's economy and security issues, but as a former vice president from 1997 to 2007, he's also hoping to highlight his political experience.
I felt there was need, for somebody like me to step out, experience in politics, experience in governance, experience in business, to try and restore and bring back the country.
Since winning the People's Democratic Party primaries in 2018, Atiku Abubakar has been campaigning around the nation. Just like current President Muhammadu Buhari, Abubakar is a Muslim from the north of Nigeria, but the two candidates, who are also both in their 70s, diverge when it comes to economic policy.
So Buhari is positioning himself as statist, pro-big government and all of that, while Atiku Abubakar on the other side is positioning himself as pro-business, pro-private enterprise.
Following a career in the Nigerian Customs Service, Abubakar made his fortune investing in various sectors, like agriculture and the oil industry, winning him the support of the financial elite. But an endorsement from big business is a double-edged sword, with many of his detractors viewing him as corrupt.
4 Nigerian widows have opened a civil court case in The Hague against Royal Dutch Shell. The plaintiffs accused the oil company of having been complicit in the executions of their husbands during a military crackdown in Nigeria in 1995. Esther Kiobel, Victoria Bera, Blessing Iyawo, and Charity Levula are seeking an apology and compensation. Their spouses were amongst 9 activists from the Ogoni tribe who were hanged for murder after having protested against environmental damage caused by Shell's Nigerian subsidiary. Shell said it did not encourage authorities to orchestrate the men's deaths. Widows say the company colluded in a sham trial.
Shell came into my life to make me a refugee, living in harsh conditions with my entire family. I have been made to pay the penalty for the crime perpetrated by Shell. The pain I have been through, the pain that I have been living in these years does not seem to go away.
A prominent Kenyan human rights activist has been found dead 6 days after she went missing. Caroline Mwatha campaigned against the abuse of people in police custody. Authorities say that the mother died during an abortion and that 6 people have been arrested. Mwatha worked for the Dandara Community Justice Centre, which has documented cases of extrajudicial killings by security personnel and campaigned for justice for the victims. Kenyan police frequently face allegations of brutality and extrajudicial killings from civilians and rights groups, but officers are rarely charged and almost never convicted. There's growing discontent in South Africa after a 3rd day without electricity. The blackouts exposed the frailty of the struggling state-owned utility firm Eskom, despite government promises to revive it. Nicolas Chemin has more.
It's Africa's most industrialised economy, but South Africa has now been hit by electricity cuts for 3 days running. Many shops are closed. These car mechanics are struggling.
Where we would normally have bright lights with 100 lights on top of us being able to see perfectly, we're now having to resort to cell phones and lights so we can see inside what we're doing.
The lack of electricity has entailed another problem for shop owners.
Most of my customers, they don't use cash. They don't carry cash. They have to swipe. Machine can't work without electricity.
Eskom, the state-owned firm, supplies more than 90% of the nation's power, but it's faced with more than $30 billion of debt. President Cyril Ramaphosa wants to split the company into 3 separate entities.
We've got all our energy eggs in one basket. When the generator of energy in our country reports that there are 6 units, it means that all 6 eggs are broken, and possibly we just have maybe a dozen eggs, and it should not be like that.
But his plan to split Eskom has disgruntled powerful labour unions and some of his colleagues from the ruling African National Congress Party. Ramaphosa wants to find a solution to the cuts swiftly. The general election is now only 2 months away.
Nearly a month has passed since riots broke out in Zimbabwe, in which at least 17 people were killed. The country's opposition is still refusing to resume dialogue with the government until its members are free and the army off the streets. Our Stephen Carstens and Caroline Dumais report.
Criminal courts have never been so busy in Zimbabwe. In Harare, prison trucks unload detainees so they can be judged in mass trials. This group of 58 was arrested on January the 14th. They've been charged with public violence, accused of having caused disorder in the streets and having set a police station on fire. Their lawyer failed to get them bail.
Yes, and then the accused persons are really complaining about their conditions of detention. It is quite challenging because we're having to deal with quite a huge number of accused persons at the same time.
The numbers of those being kept in detention have been rising since mid-January. The situation remains volatile, even if the streets seem quiet. Images on social networks show authorities targeting opposition protesters. In memory of the victims, the Zimbabwe Council of Churches invited all parties to pray and reconcile their differences. Leader of the opposition, Nelson Chamisa, was present. he seldom attends public functions as he fears for his security.
I'm a leader to members of parliament who cannot even sleep in their houses on account of politics. I'm coming here as a leader of a people who have been brutalized, assaulted, not for having committed any crime, but just having freedom of conscience and having been MDC.
President Mnangagwa has offered a national dialogue inviting all 23 political parties to join. But Nelson Chamisa has scoffed at the invitation, saying credible negotiations can only be called by an independent mediator.
We have all agreed that we move forward on a common understanding together without any one single party imposing how to move forward.
Life cannot return to normal in Zimbabwe until dialogue is re-established between the government and opposition.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
Arctic is going to be exploited, and the scale of this exploitation will only grow.
We have a